V'chein matzinu b'nochash hakadmoni shenosan ein of mashe'enu lo. He had a cheshek for Chava, and he had relations with Chava, but at the end, Masha bikesh lo nosnu lo. He never got her as a wife. Umasha biyodo, and when he, as originally he was standing erect, notlu mimena, that was taken away from him. Omar Kodesh Baruch Ani Omarti Yehi Melech Al Kol Behema V'Chaya. It's not clear how the Gemara knows this, but the initial plan was that the Nachash, the serpent, would be the king of all the animals. He was Arum Mikol Chayas Asad, etc., etc. He was the smartest. The Akshav, after the sin, Arum Mikol Behemam Kol Chayas Asad. He is cursed more than any other animal. Ani amarti yahalik becomes kufa. I said he should stand erect. Akshav, now his legs will cut off. Al gechono yelech, he'll have to move forward on his belly. Ani amarti yehi macholo kemachal adam. He should eat and consume food like a human being. But Akshav ofar yochal, he'll eat the dust. Hu amar eroges adam vesas chava. I'll kill man and marry Chava. Achshav Eva Oshes bein Cha ubein Haisha ubein Zaracha ubein Zarah. There will be hatred between man and the serpent. He goes on to say, in the name of the Maharal here, that the forces of evil, like the Nachash, are the opposite of the forces of good, but they have to come from something in common. And the desire of the Nachash for Chava is common to both the Nachash and Lahavdil to Adam. V'chein matzinu b'Kayin. Kayin wanted to marry the twin sister of Hevel, and Hevel said that he gets first dibs because it's his twin and not Kayin's. Kayin wanted to kill Hevel and marry that twin and take him away from Hevel. And he didn't get to do that. And instead, even that which he had was taken away from him. He became, instead of an Oved Adama, he was cursed, Lanuav Lanut. Right? He would have to be a wanderer from place to place. Korach also, he wanted to be a Kohen and take over the kahuna. It wasn't his. He was from Shevet Levi, not a Kohen. And they took that which was in his hand away from him, and he was swallowed up in the ground. Bilam wanted to take away the mammon of Balak, and he went to curse the Jewish people. Not only did he not get that mammon, but he also was destroyed in the battle there, Midian. Doeg was a great scholar. Avi Harov Gadol Shabbat Talmidim. This kind of David, he had suffered from jealousy of David when he realized that became aware of the fact that David was Navon, was Ish Toar, Maraponim Alocha, and at the end, what happened was Doeg spoke Lashon Hara out of jealousy, spoke Lashon Hara about David, and he says here that Doeg was one of the greatest scholars. When he became jealous of David's Torah knowledge, he attempted to belittle David in the eyes of King Shaul. He was punished with an early death. Who do we have next? I believe it's Achitophel. Let's see if I'm right. Yeah, Achitophel. Achitophel wanted to become king at the time of David HaMelech, and he died young. Gehazi was the person who wanted to take over the property of Naaman, the general of Aram, against Elisha's wishes. He was punished with Saras. Avshalom, oh boy. We're going to have a lot to say about Avshalom in this Gemara, but he wanted to usurp the kingdom from his father David, but he lost his life during the rebellion. Adonio, he was also a son of David. He wanted to marry Avishag, and he wanted to take over the throne for himself, and Shlomo Melech had him executed. Uzziah wanted to serve as a Kohen. He was stricken with Saras. Haman, of course, wanted to destroy the Jewish people. He himself lost his position. He was killed. He was hung. They had a desire for something that wasn't appropriate for them. The Mishnah says, "B'yorech hischila ba'avera." So since she began her avera with the yorech, then her yorech is going to fall first. Minon immediately, how do we see this? Ilay mishum t'chsiv b'seis Hashemes yorechech nofeles vespitnech tzava. So you see that yorechech is mentioned first. The erech is mentioned first, and the beten only second. Vaksiv, but 6 psukim later, it says, V'tzavtza bitnov v'naflo yerech, that first her stomach will fall apart, and only then a yerech. Amar Abai ki layet chilo yerech. When the Kohen gave the klola, he cursed her yerech first, because that was first in her guilt, in the sin. V'hadar beten layet. Then he would makal the beten. But umaya ki bodke, but as far as the impact of the drinking of the mayim orim, ki orchayu bodke beten beresha, first the mayim orim goes down to the stomach and destroys the stomach, v'hada yarech, and then it goes down. So this was all done in order, as the Gemara is going to explain, that people should see that what was meant to happen happened exactly in the sequence as the Kohen predicted it. B'klolanamik siv latzbos beten v'lan pil yoreach. So even in the klola, which was public knowledge, the Kohen mentioned the beten first. Hahu, that pasuk, is modia la Kohen. The Kohen notifies that even though he had given the klol and the yerech first, but nevertheless befall, in actuality, the beten beresha, first her stomach would be destroyed, and then hadar yerech shalol lahotzi laz al mayim amorim, because people will say, hey, it didn't happen exactly the way the Kohen predicted it. And now we get to the mission of Shimshon HaGibor. Shimshon was a great shofet, but he fell. Holach achar enov. As we'll soon see, the Gemara, the Mishnah will quote the pasuk. No, the Gemara is going to quote the pasuk. Lefichach mida keneged mida, measure for measure, nikru plishtim es enov, they gouged out his eyes. Shenemar vayochazu plishtim vayinaku es enov. Avshalom nizgod b'saro. Avshalom was a very beautiful, handsome man, and he had beautiful long hair, and that brought him to a state of gaiva. And lefichach, therefore, nitla b'saro, he was hung by his hair. Ulefisha bal eser pilagshe aviv, when he wanted to establish his claim for the throne, so David HaMelech was out. At a certain point, he was away, and Avshalom went in and he had relations with the 10 pilagshim of his father David. David barach miponov. David was fleeing from Avshalom. Ozav es beso, hoser shomes eser pilagshov, and Avshalom Shol Eitzam as Kenim Alasos, and Achitophel said you should have a relationship with the Pilagshim of your father, and they were 10 in number. I will soon see that he got 10 piercings into his heart. Lefichach Nitnu Bo, these are the Nari Yoav, when they found Avshalom hanging from his hair, hanging from a tree, Eselonivios. These are small kind of swords, and they pierced it into his heart. Shenemar vayasovu asorin orim nosei klei Yoav. Lefisha ganav sholosh gnevos leiv oviv leiv bezdin v'leiv Yisrael. This Avshalom was a real liar. The article goes through the history of it pretty nicely, so we'll just quickly read what he says. When Yoav, David HaMelech's general, found Avshalom hanging from the tree, he thrust 3 lances into Avshalom, and then 10 young men bearers of Yoav's armor circled Avshalom, killed him. Fine. Avshalom asked his father, Melech David, for a letter stating that by command of the king, Avshalom had the right to choose any 2 individuals to be at his service. Using this letter, Avshalom enlisted one pair after another of the most worthy men of Israel, men who were chief judges of courts, by telling each pair in turn that they were his choice. This was all just, what's the word I want to use here? Subterfuge. All right, we'll get the word in a minute. He continued to, look at that. He continued to employ this subterfuge until he had brought under his command 200 such individuals. By publicizing his association with these prominent individuals, he impressed the entire nation. Thus, he deceived his father, right, David HaMelech, by getting him to write this letter, the judiciary, right, every pair of judges, and then the nation as a whole. He stole the hearts of Israel by convincing them that he was the only one truly concerned for their welfare, and they should therefore coronate him as their king. Lefichach nisku bo shlosha shvatim. Okay, this was, I think, Yoav. Let's see. All right. Shenemar vayikach shlosha shvatim v'chapo v'yiskaim b'leiv Avshalom. V'chein le'inyan atova. So too, with regard to reward, HaKadosh Baruch Hu meets out reward, mida keneged mida. Miriam himtina l'Moshe sha'achas. When she put him on the Yor, she waited for him an hour. Shenemar vatei-satzav achoso merachok lefichach nisakvu la. Right after the whole story of Lashon Hara, she was stricken with tsaras, and they waited for 7 days. All right, this akvu la Yisrael shiva yom v'midbar. Shenemar va'am lo nasa ad hey asef Miriam. They didn't move on until Miriam was tahora. They waited for her for 7 days. So Tosas points out over here that mida tova meruba, midas paranias al achas chamesh meos. So if she waited a day, they should have waited 500 days for her as a reward. But the answer is, says Tosas, she only waited a part of an hour, which is 1/500 of 7. Yosef Zachalik Baras Aviv, the Ein Be'echav Gadol Imenu, the greatest of the brothers, buried father Jacob. Shenemar Vayal Yosef Likbaras Aviv, Vayal Imo Gam Rechev V'Gam Parashim, and Mida Keneged Mida Milon God Gadol Mi Yosef, Shlo Nisasek Boe El Moshe, and because Yosef, who was such a gadol, nevertheless, he dedicated himself to the burial of his father. So too, Midah Keneged Midah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu appointed Moshe Rabbeinu, who was the gadol Shabi Yisrael, to bury or to transport the bones of Yosef. Moshe Zacha B'atzmas Yosef, Ve'em Yisrael gadol imen. So that covered was given to Yosef. Shenemar Yikach Moshe Satzmos Yosef Imo. Mi gadol mi Moshe Shonis Asik Bo Ela HaMakom. In other words, what's the Midah Keneged Midah? That since Moshe was Osek B'atzmas Yosef, Moshe deserved that some gadol mimenu should be Osek in his Kfur Ela HaMakom HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. Shenemar V'yikbar So B'gai. Lo Moshe Bilvad Amru. It's not just Moshe that Kadosh Baruch Hu was Osek B'Kfura, so El Kol HaTzadikim. In every case of a tzaddik, Kadosh Baruch Hu somehow is there to escort and accompany the burial. Shenemar v'holach lefanov tzidkecha kvod Hashem yasvecha. Your righteousness shall go before you, and the glory of Hashem shall gather you in. Gather you in is always an indication of kvura. Not only did God occupy himself with Moshe upon his passing, but God occupies himself with all the righteous who pass away to bring their souls to their eternal place and reward them. He does not occupy himself with their bodies, except for the case of Moshe. God himself attended to the actual burial. Now we get to the Mishnah, the Gemara's interpretation of the Mishnah of Shimshon. Tan Rabbanan Shimshon b'einov Morat. Shimshon's downfall was set off by his eyes. Shenemar, when he saw in a place called Timnas, Isha mibnos plishtim, vayomer Shimshon alaviv osa kachli, ki hi yeshar be'enai. His father had no clue what was going on over here. Shimshon was so great, and now he wants to marry a woman from Timnas, a bnos plishtim. But again, all this was Shimshon had kavanah l'shem shamayim, but nevertheless, there was some admixture and some motivation of pleasure from his eye that he lefichach nikru plishtim es einov shnemar vayochzu plishtim einaku es einov. Eini, the Gemara asks, is Shimshon really guilty of holech achar einov? And this was a sin v'aksiv yav v'imo lo yodu ma ki me'ashem hi. They didn't know what was flying, the parents. They refused to agree to have him marry this woman. They didn't realize that this was all part of Hashem's plans. And this was in order lisgaros beplishtim. He's ozol mia basar yashrusei ozal. Shimshon's primary motive in marrying a Philistine woman was to find a pretext to fight the Plishtim. At that time, the Plishtim dominated the Jewish nation. The Jews did not have sufficient merit to fight against them. It was therefore left to Shimshon to serve as a lone warrior against the Plishtim. His plan was to live with the Plishtim, to find personal cause to attack them. And this would not cause reprisals against the Jews. The Plishtim would view his acts as those of a disenfranchised madman who was clearly acting on his own. So, for example, when the woman from Timnas was subsequently given in marriage by her father to another man, Shimshon responded by using foxes, and he burnt down the crops of the Philistine. When they retaliated by burning the woman and her father alive, he responded with a second attack. Thus, his motives for marrying the woman was sound. However, when Shimshon stated that the Timnas woman was fitting in his eyes, quote unquote, he demonstrated that some physical desire had entered his thoughts, And for this slight imperfection, he was punished severely. Then he has a whole discussion here about the fact that there was no Isa to marry this Philistine because she actually converted to Judaism. Tanya, Rebbe Omer, Tchilas Kilkulo Shel Shimshon Hoy Ba'aza. But this is a Pella. I mean, it wasn't really Ba'aza, it was in Timnas. Okay, fine. Lefichach Loka Ba'aza. Tchilas Kilkulo Ba'aza, that Siv Vayelech Shimshon Azasa, Vayar Sham Isha Zona, Vayovolel. We'll soon see that Zona doesn't mean what you think it means. So she was the seller of Mazonos, like Chazal say about Rochav. Okay, Lefichach Loka Ba'aza. So the beginning of his downfall was in Asa, therefore Loka Ba'aza. T'chsiv, Vayachazu, Flishtim, Einakus, Eina Vayoridu, So Azasa. In fact, the Gemara of HaKsiv, Vayered Shimshon Timnasa, Vayar Isha Mibitim Nasa, Mibnos Plishtim. So before this whole story of Shimshon in Asa, there was Shimshon in Timnas, and there he found this Plishti woman. In other words, his marriage to Timnas, to the woman from Timnas, we don't know her name, was not an act of znus. So his problem began. His downfall began for his act in Asa, marrying a woman who was a zona, and he didn't have a legal marriage with her. Now, after Shimshon has a relationship with these two women, now we get to the third woman. Vayach Rechin Vayev Isha Benachal Sorek Ushma Delila. Tanya Rebbe Omer. If we analyze the name Delila and its meaning etymologically, we'll understand how appropriate it that her name is Delila. Why? Because Dildala es kocha, she weakened his energies, sapped him of his strength. Dildala es libo, she somehow, what's the word we want to use? She wooed him, I'm going to use that term, and he revealed the secret of his strength, Dildalas Masov, and she diminished his Maisim Tovim. And this might be an implicit criticism that Shimshon should have understood from her name that this was an allusion, a remez, that what would happen. So we have here Dildala es Masov, and now the Gemara goes through these three. Dildalas kocho d'chsiv vayasar kocho me'olam. Dildalas libo d'chsiv vatera delila ki higidla es kol libo. Dildalas Masov distalik shchina minei d'chsiv v'hu yoda ki Hashem sar me'olam. Now, the Plishtim's officers, whatever, they bribed Delila to get out of Shimshon what is the source of his power. And they would pay her a tremendous amount of money if she could figure it out, discover what the source of his power was. And she discovered that he was a Nazir. When Shimshon revealed to Delila that he was a Nazir, and that if his hair would be cut off, he would lose all his power, the pasuk testifies that he was telling her the truth. So Gemara wants to know, how did she know that he was telling the truth? Gemara gives two answers. That sometimes you can tell the way a person says something that he's telling the truth. She realized that his hair was very long. She knew that he never drank wine. She understood, therefore, that he was a Nazir, and he had told her the truth. Abaye Omar Yodabo, V'yosutzadik Telomapik Shem Shamayim Levatola. His came in the Omar, Nazir Elokimani, Omra Hashta Vade Kushtakom. When Shimshon took an oath that he's a Nazir and mentioned the name of God, she understood that this was truth. Vayiki tzika lo bidvarei kol hayomim va'te'al tsehu. And it was after she tormented him with her words every day and pressed him, he became exacerbated to death. My vatal tseyu, what does it mean she pressed him? Omer Rabbi Yitzchak debei Rabbi Ami b'shas k'mar bia nishmata mitachtav. At the time of the culmination of cohabitation, she would slip away from beneath him. And this action taken by Delilah at the time when Samson's arousal was greatest caused him great anguish. According to the Alshich, Shimshon was concerned that she was causing him to waste his seed. Rabbi Yitzchak debei Rabbi Ami, yeah, fine. Now, the Gemara speaks about another pasuk regarding the mother of Shimshon, who was instructed about the Nazirus of her son to be born. V'ata ishamri no. So the angel appears to this barren woman, Slalponis, and informs her that she would bear a son, and he instructs her exactly how to act during pregnancy because her son would be a Nazir. Now be careful, do not drink wine or aged wine, and do not eat anything contaminated. My koltame, v'su ad hashta dvarim tmeim ka'achla. Rabbi Yitzchak debei Rav Ami, dvarim asurim ben Nazir. This refers only to that which is asur in Nazir, grapes or water that was absorbed the taste, that's mishras hadnovim, and different parts of the vine, all the grape products. And she would have to abstain from them even in her pregnancy. Vayivka Elohim es hamachtesh asher balechi. God split open the hollow that was in the jawbone. Water came from it and he drank. Rabbi Yitzchak debei Rabbi Ami, hu iva l'dover tameh, l'fichach nislu chayo b'dover tameh. He had a desire for something contaminated. As he wanted to marry the daughter of an Oved Avodah Zarah, although she did convert before the marriage. His parents nevertheless objected to it because in his status as a Nazir, he should not have married a Giores from the Plishtim. Now, what does it mean? His life was made dependent upon a contaminated thing, and that is the jaw of the donkey. And if not for that jaw, he would have died of thirst. Vatochel Ruach Hashem, the Spirit of Hashem began to resound in him in the camp of Dan, between Tzorah and Eshtaol. Rabbi Chama Rabbi Chanina, Cholsa Nevuasa Shel Yaakov Avinu. The prophecy of our forefather Jacob was fulfilled. Vatochel means it was fulfilled. Tichsiv, what did Yaakov Avinu bestow upon Shevet David? Dan, Yehi Dan Nachash Alei Derech. Dan will be a serpent on the highway. And this description is mirrored by Shimshon's tactics in fighting the Plishtim. A snake camouflages itself in order to bend in with its environment. Shimshon too made himself appear to be a traitor to the Jewish nation so that he could attack the Plishtim without causing the Plishtim to retaliate against the Jewish nation. L'fa'amo b'machanei Dan. So the pasuk continues to resound in him in the camp of Dan. Omer Rabbi Yitzchak Debei Rabbi Ami Malamit Shaisa Shchina Makashkeshes Lefon of Kizug. The divine presence rang before him like a bell to escort him wherever he went. Ksiv Hacha Lefa'amo b'machanei Dan, to resound in him in the camp of Dan. Uksiv Hasam b'Pa'amon v'Rimon. Regarding the Kohen Gadol, it says a bell and a pomegranate. The sound of the bell accompanied the Kohen Gadol wherever he walked, just like the Shechina accompanied Shimshon. Bein Tzara ubein Eshtael, Rabbi Asi Tzar v'Eshtael Shnei Harim Gedolim Hayu. These were two large mountains. Va'karan Shimshon utachnam zebazeh. Shimshon was able to uproot them and ground them together. Hu Yachel Oshias Yisrael. And the Malach tells the mother of Shimshon, he will begin to save Israel from the hand of the Plishtim. Simply understood, this means that Shimshon would be the first judge to fight against the Plishtim, although the earlier judge Shamgar had limited success against the Plishtim. Shimshon was the first to cause the Plishtim significant losses. And now the Gemara darshans on this pasuk, Omer Rab Chama, Rab Chimina, Rab Chanina. Here we take a look at Daf Yud Huchal Shuasa Shel Avimelech. The oath of Avimelech, Melech Plishtim, was desecrated. It was rendered null and void. Siv im tishkar li ulenini ulenechti. Avimelech made a bris with Avram, and he turns to Avram and he says, "Swear to me here by God that you will not deal falsely with me, or with my son, or with my grandson." So it seems that Avraham Avinu accepted this bris. However, because the Plishtim violated that oath by subjugating the Jews, Shimshon was not bound by the oath. And this is where we'll stop. And I'll wish you a good Moed, Moedim L'Simcha, and thank you so much. And Chag Sameach.